Okay, today's video is kind of a redo of a video that I did some time ago for the FaderPort 8 and using it in Cakewalk. So here's the FaderPort 8 production controller from PreSonus being used in Cakewalk. All right, so first thing that I want to say is that you have to be in the right mode on your PreSonus. And I'm going to apologize in advance if we've got some things out of focus here, and if you happen to hear some extra noise and whatnot, because my controller is like basically attached to this boom arm on the mic. So you might hear a little bit of thumping around. Sorry about that. I will point out the things as I need to in order for you to know what I'm pressing, because apparently cameras have a hard time focusing on these little LEDs for whatever reason, and especially these scribble strips across the top. So I'll go over them as I can. So the first thing that I want to show you is I'm actually going to close out of Cakewalk. And we're going to look at the surface itself, and I'm going to turn it off. And then I'm going to press and hold the first two select buttons here while I turn it back on. And the reason I'm going to do that is to make sure that we get into the correct mode, and that's going to be MCU. Now you could do Huey because Cakewalk has beta Huey support in it, but I found in general, I think overall the MCU is a little bit better. There's a little plus and minus on either side, but I'm going to choose the MCU here. And then you'll see it says MCU Sonar is that mode. That's what I'm already in. And then you choose Restart FaderPort. Right, so that's going to restart the FaderPort. Then you can launch into Cakewalk. So I'm going to do that now. And I'm going to open up my basic Scratchpad Project and put that window in focus. So now you can see all of my faders automatically came up for all of the channels here. So here we are. I want to just kind of go over a few things on the top. Of course, you have the scribble strips. If you could see these right now, you would see the actual track names that I have here: lead vocal, backup 1, backup 2, backup 3, backup 4, etc., etc. All of those are listed in those little scribble strips. And as you press your select options here, you'll see it's automatically selecting those tracks in Cakewalk as well. There are some options that you can set here. So if you go under Act and then press this little Properties button, there's some options that you can select in here. You might want to go ahead and get these right to begin with. So this is where I'm in MCU instead of Huey mode. I have mine set to Fader Touch selects the channel, and also Select highlights the track. I don't have any of these other ones turned on at the moment. I don't want Solo to select the channel automatically. The jog wheel resolution is about this guy here, and we'll get into that. Right now it's set to measures. All of these buttons over here are your F1 through F8, so you can assign those as you like. Important note, any of these that launch views, if they launch a view in the multi-dock, they'll launch it, but they won't close it. If it's a view that can go in the multi-dock, even if it's not going in the multi-dock and it's going to a separate view screen by itself, they don't toggle on and off, whereas other things do. So for example, the browser doesn't have that problem. I would imagine that the inspector also doesn't have that problem. I don't have that currently assigned to any one of these buttons. Okay. So moving on, go ahead and set these things, save it as your preset, get out of there. Now, we'll just go top down, left to right. On the top, scribble strips, your selects, that obviously selects the channel that you're on. You've got your mute and your solo, right? Those do pretty obvious things. The record, now you'll notice that record is not here on the individual channel, but you have an arm button over here. And so the way that this works is you press arm and then you press the channel that you want to arm like this. And now you'll see that that channel is actually armed. If you want to unarm it, just click it again. If you want to arm multiples of them, you can do them like that. And then you can go back into not armed mode. Even if you have something armed and you come out of arming mode, you'll see it stays that way. But you can't really tell by looking at the strip that it's armed right now. You have to go back into arm mode and then you can see which ones are. I'm going to unarm that, go back into regular mode. So that's the way that these buttons up here work. Of course, you've got your volume control here. And then you've got a pan knob in the upper left, right? So if you watch my pan right here, you can see I can move that all the way left and I can move it all the way to the right. And if you press down on this button, it centers it back to center. All right, so that's the way that that works there. That's the slider and the pan knob. Down the side, you can see that you've got some buttons for solo clear and mute clear. So if I had a number of things, different solos here, I can clear all of those solos at once. Same thing with mutes. So if I had a bunch of mutes, I could clear my mutes all at once. Basically the same function as you would have up here at the top, right? If I have those soloed, you'll see that's there. And if I solo clear, it's going to do the same thing as like a global solo mode. These buttons down here do not have a function that I can find in Cakewalk that don't do anything basically. Over here are your mode buttons. Now a lot of these work great in Studio One, but in Cakewalk they don't do a heck of a lot. So I mostly leave this here in track mode. As soon as you touch edit plugins, it gets weird. Sends gets weird. Like it's supposed to work and the manual says it'll work, but I haven't found a very useful way to make it work. When you go into pan mode, this basically turns all of your faders into pan knobs. So rather than doing a single channels pan, you have the ability to do all of your channels pans at once. And you can see again, if you watch the pan knob here, as I go down, it's left. If I go all the way up, it's right. And back here to the center is center. All right, and I can double click that and that will take that back to center. The value here is that if I'm in the console view, then you can see, here's all of these, look at all these pan knobs here from my vocals, right? So here's my vocals all the way over to about there. So I can go all the way left with all of them, all the way right with all of them, and then of course come back to give or take center. I'm going to go ahead and double click each of these to bring them back to actual center. So this gives you basically just a way to look at the pan across multiple channels. So I'm going to put myself back to track mode there. And then coming down, mostly don't use much of any of this except for the bus, right? So of course you can see my master and my room. And if I hit bus here, that's what I'm going to be controlling as my master and my room. And if I had additional bus channels, you'll see those automatically come up here and I can then adjust those channels as well. So that's kind of a cool way to be able to do your basically top-down mixing at the bus level right here on the FaderPort. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of those guys. If I could click someplace in the right spot so I could actually remove it. Okay, there we go. All right, so we're going to go back into regular mode here. I'm going to get out of the console view. And this is what I was talking about at the beginning. So if you go shift, that's the console. If I hit it again, you'll notice it does not go away. Again, nothing happens. I have to close it this way. Fine, no big deal. All right, so now we've gone down through this section of things. We're going to go back to just regular track mode, which is basically audio. And it's a little strange that you have to press audio to get back to all of your stuff, but you'll see I actually have my V-Drums MIDI channel is here as well. So it really is just all of the tracks. These other ones don't really do anything very reliable to me. These across the top, ordinarily in Studio One, these would be for switching out of your lash, trim, and write modes for automation and putting your read on and off for automation. Unfortunately, in Cakewalk, they don't do anything at all. However, the shift functions that are just underneath each one of them, and you probably can't see those, but this is save, redo, and undo, all do work, right? So if I had, record armed this thing, and I go ahead and I hit record, and I'm recording some stuff onto this vocal channel here, right? Now I stop. If I hit shift and this button up here, right, the off button is undo, and that undoes that. If I hit redo, then it redoes it, and then undo, of course, undoes it, right? So those are useful functions. They just don't, the regular button function doesn't actually work. And I've actually marked this one, the one that's the F8, because I don't use the vocals view for anything. Shift F8 I've set to be undo as well, so I don't have to reach all the way up there. It's right here. So that's how that works. This to me is, aside from of course the faders and all of that kind of stuff, this is the most useful piece of the whole FaderPort, even in Studio One. Of course I use the transport in all of this more than anything. So this set of buttons here is for the different modes that basically how the buttons and the knob here work, right? So if you're in channel mode, you'll notice right here, so here's my where am I. In channel mode, as I move, you'll see it shows different channels, and then over here, you're seeing those different channels being represented. So now I've got backup 3 is my first channel. So this works like you would expect it to work for the where am I within Cakewalk. And this is actually a function that I really wish that Studio One had, was a where am I. So I could see visually on the screen what I'm actually looking at in terms of where they are. Of course, I can see that on my scribble strips, but it's really nice to be able to have the function to see where you are on the screen. Related to that, we've got the bank button over here, and that, instead of moving channel by channel, moves in 8s. So you can see my channel 1 now is down here on 9. I can go left, and that takes me back up to the top. That takes me to 9. That takes me to 14. Right, so you can see, and the only reason it's only going to 14 is because that's like as far as I don't have that many channels, so I can't go the full next set. So that's that, and then you've got a zoom button here, and if you use the knob in zoom mode, you'll see you get horizontal zoom, and if you use the these two previous and next buttons, then you get vertical zoom. Now, personally, I don't use that a whole lot just because I've got, 100 other ways that I can do zoom, but that's fine. You've also then got scroll mode, which allows you to move forward and back here with the knob. Of course, you can still use the forward and back here as well. They go in the same increments. Unless you change that view right there. Now, this is my personal preference, where the wheel goes in measures and the forward back goes in beats. And you'll see the longer you hold it, the faster that it goes. Right? So again, that's under Act. Click on this properties thing here. And then the jog wheel is this, that measures. The transport is here, and that's set for beats. Let's see. So we covered that. Master does nothing. Click does nothing. Section doesn't do anything useful. And marker will actually, you can use If you insert your markers, let's just insert a couple here real quick. You can use marker mode, and then you can shift between the different markers using the wheel to get from marker to marker. You can actually drop a marker too, right? So if I'm out here at, let's get back into scroll mode and scroll out here. If you press down on this, that'll drop a marker in marker mode as well. And then of course you have to be on your keyboard and typing, which then you might as well have just pressed M. There's just no way that I'm aware of to drop a marker and press OK. It doesn't, like, you know, I just want to press a blank marker. That's not going to happen. So that's marker mode. And of course, then we have the transport down here at the bottom. The you know, obviously most useful things that we can get out of this thing are being able to get around the track. So forward and back are here. Now a nice feature here, you'll notice that these two here, if you saw close up, you would see it says RTZ, or if you hit them together, boom, that takes you all the way to the very beginning of the track. So that's handy. Like that. You've got your play, and then of course pause, and play, and then of course stop. Now I have my stop returned to 0, my pause not. Your record button, if something is armed, of course that's going to record. And then if you've got your section here and you've got it marked for looping, you can turn your looping on and off here with this button. And that's going to just, you know, turn on your looping and turn off your looping. So that's kind of these functions here. So overall, if I were just using Cakewalk, now before I had a BCF 2000, it's basically does a lot of these same functions, but it doesn't really, it's not very well labeled. I used to use a Contour Shuttle Pro and the BCF, and honestly the Shuttle Pro was way more useful because it did all of this kind of stuff with the transport and getting in and out. The BCF did the faders and the pans and such. One thing I liked better about the BCF is that it had a dedicated pan knob for each one of these, but it was so badly labeled and weird to use that it honestly just didn't get a lot of use here. The FaderPort would. One other thing I wanted to point out is, though, even though the different modes don't work up here on these buttons, it doesn't mean that you can't use it to do your automation. So I want to show you that real quick. If we're in here and I put this in write mode, and at the moment I'm in touch write mode. So you can see if I've got this, let's see, I'm on the lead vocal channel, I'm in the right spot. I'm going to just do a real quick vocal change. So you can see I can record my vocal and I can do that, and that just works like that's supposed to work, right? And I'm going to turn off write mode, and then when I come back here and I play it back, you can see that my fader follows like it's supposed to, and all of that works. Now I of course then can go in here and put myself back in write mode, and because I'm on touch, when I do this, as soon as I grab a hold of this, you can see it starting to write over it again, and then when I stop, you can see it's replaced that stuff. If I switch this over to latch mode instead, and I go ahead and do this, and then I'm going to bring this down like that, and I'm going to leave it there, you'll see that it's going to stay in place just like that, because it latches onto wherever I put it. And then in overwrite mode, it works like this, where as soon as I touch it, anything that I do is overwriting what was there before. And then, you know, of course, whatever I didn't overwrite is still left like it was. Personally, I think touch is probably the most intuitive of the three, so I just use that. But yeah, you can totally use any of your automations in here and they work as well. I hope that this video has been useful in showing some of the different modes and functions of the FaderPort when using in Mackie control mode and with Cakewalk by Bandlab. If you found this video useful, I'd appreciate it if you'd like it. Share, subscribe to the channel. Thanks much for taking the time out of your day to watch the video. Hope you got something out of it. Have a good one.